people associate you with England, and we're always talking about the London market, but Stockholm, very good market last year. Can you kind of tell us what this city means in the overall plans of the UFC in Europe moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, the UFC, obviously based in Las Vegas, they're extremely proud of what's happening in Sweden. You know, you've got to give it to the fans. The fans react when we put on an event here. They react quickly. They love the sport. It's on television. They love the viewership is high. This is one of our biggest markets in the globe. So we're always going to continue to repeat back in Sweden. It's important to us not only just to be here and to deliver a good event. It's also important to us to keep developing the fan base and to have an interaction with the fan base.
Tough situation here this week, obviously. You made the announcement earlier. Can you talk about, I guess, you know, maybe the disappointment that's involved and kind of how you address it and move forward?
Yeah, well, it started to evolve, as you well know, earlier in the week, and nobody's more disappointed than Alexander. I can guarantee you that. You'll get a chance to speak to him later. It's our job. We have a lot of fighters on the card. No one fighter is bigger than a UFC event. And so it's important for us then to work really hard to find a replacement. Somebody that you've got to defer to the experts, right? So you defer to Joe Silva and Dana, and they ask the fighter, Musasi, what he wants to do. He was adamant he wanted to fight. Alexander was adamant that he had a guy that could replace him, obviously through one of his sparring partners, and so it was a natural matchup, and everybody's excited by it. I mean, none more so than those two fighters. And Latifi, what a great opportunity.
I was going to say, as disappointing as it is, it could be a heck of a Cinderella story if this guy goes in and does something special.
That's why we love the sport. That's why we love this sport. It can go either way. I worked in soccer. It can be a hit the bar, it can hit the post, it can go either way. But this sport, you know, it can happen like that. And all of a sudden, you know, you can be in 160 countries on national television, and you can be the hero and the star. What a great story.
Garry, last time Dana was over in the UK, he excitedly told us all that he was working on a TV deal. I just wondered, obviously don't go into the specifics if you can't, but how did that meeting go, and are we looking at any type of timetable?
Yeah, we'll be coming out with an announcement imminently. I think it's clear though to us, as we look forward at our television business, it's really important in the European market to make content available other than live content. You know, 96% of our content is filmed after or made available after 2 o'clock in the morning. That makes it very difficult to build a business and to build a broader fan base other than the true MMA niche UFC fan. So we've made it very clear with our partner that we're going to be talking about that we need to develop magazine programming during prime time in order to create interest and awareness, more importantly, about the sport and the UFC.
What aspects went into the decision making for choosing Latifi as a replacement?
You know, it'd be unfair for me to start getting into the details of that, because really, truly, it's a Dana, Joe Silva. You know, what's the right opponent? We looked at every option. I'll be very clear. You know, we always look at all the options, and the guys are great at that. It goes everything from should we cancel the whole event, should we move the date to all, and of course none of that makes any sense. What we really wanted to do was meet Musasi's needs, and what he wanted to do was fight. So then it was a case of, you know, who's best suited. Lorenzo Fertitta, I think, made one of the greatest statements when I said to him, what do you think? And he said, hey, great, another Swede.
Well, UFC is expanding into India, has plans to expand into India. So basically, how different will its approach be when compared to Europe? Because Europe is, again, a new market, and India, a big market in that sense.
Yeah, well, the important thing about developing any new market is talent. It's great to have national heroes. It's great to have national stories. One of the first points of entry in India, because broadcasting the television creates the general fan base, and that's a must, right? So we have some engagement there with the television network. The next part is how do you create the talent, and the Ultimate Fighter is always a great way to develop that talent. You'll see a lot of fighters on Saturday night who came through the Ultimate Fighter network. So that's really important to us as well. So you'll see that as well. And then, of course, it's hosting events. The event model is well known, and there's a call. Currently we're at 33 events a year. That's going to continue to grow, and as time grows, you'll see events in India as well. It takes a while, it takes time, but we know that there's an interest and demand in India.
For a country which has no history in MMA in that sense, even though the history of MMA is short.
Yeah, it's a cricket nation. You know, they have the same conversation about soccer or football. So you know, MMA is obviously going to clearly develop and build, the same way as football is going to clearly develop and build. The fans have an interest in it. You know, there's an interest in watching this sport. So we've got to try and feed that demand.
Is the Indian market similar to the China market? Into China recently? Are there any similarities there?
Yeah, I think each market has its nuances, but the difference with the Asia market, or you know, China's different. But if you look at the Asia market, there's a history around martial arts. The difficulty in China, there isn't, but they are connected to it, and their neighbours are involved in it. In India, of course, it is governed by cricket. And you know, I worked at Nike, and we used to have the conversation all the time. If you want to be important in India, you better get into cricket, or try and teach a lot of people to play soccer.
Wrestling's quite big in India as well.
Sorry?
Wrestling is quite big.
Wrestling is big in India. You know, it's a big culture, it's a big sport for them there. Each market has nuances. One of the nuances about India, which is catching everybody's attention, is the growth, is the development of its social media, of development of its infrastructure around communications. That really is the epicenter of what the commercial world is all about today. We own content for the commercial media world, right? And that's what they want. And so the demand starts there. That then creates awareness, that creates a fan base, and that's then when you start to deliver the real issue, which is the events, and you start to get national heroes and local fighters. So it's a building process. It's not, you don't just sort of turn up and hope the light switches on and it's an instant success. It doesn't work like that.
Is the wrestling factor an important factor considering India as a market?
Of course. You know, the MMA sport, we've seen great strikers unable to take on some of the great grappling experts. And GSP is a fine example of that, you know, one of the greats. And it's his wrestling technique that beats most. So if you've got that as a starter, that's great. I think one of the challenges we've always looked at is in the UK market, where wrestling is not part of the culture because of its background. It's sometimes a challenge for the fighters when they come up against great wrestling experts. So everybody's developing their nuances, and I think you'll see some great fighters come out of India.
A lot of the Swedish fans, you know, they're selling their tickets online, and they want to see Alex, and because of that, what's your reaction to all of that? And they say they want their money back. Is that even a possibility?
Well, you know, we're in the commercial world, and a lot of people have spent hard-earned money to come to the UFC event, and I think that's the clear message: is you know, it's not just about Alexander, and we understand that people have a preference to see Alexander, and we get that. But there are 7 Swedish fighters on the card. There are I think 4 fighters who are debuting on Saturday night. What great opportunity to see the beginning of a career that moves on. We like to think of fans as UFC fans. We understand that everybody's got player preferences, fighter preferences in sport. We understand that. We haven't seen the feedback yet, because obviously this is new information to a lot of people, but we'll be monitoring that. At the end of the day, I'm excited about the event. There's a lot of other fighters. It would have been disrespectful to cancel anything because of the other fighters, the work that they've put in. I think that should be appreciated by everybody. I think the fans who are attending on Saturday night, they also appreciate this sport and what it stands for. And we've tried to fulfill the needs that are required by the fans. Would I wish Alexander to be fighting on Saturday night? Sure. And would Alexander love to be fighting on Saturday night? Sure. Would the fans love to see him? Sure. But unfortunately, we have to adapt, and you know, everything is subject to change.
Some say the card as it is right now, you know, it isn't UFC level. What's your take on that?
Since I started in the business here, I've always had I've had a strong opinion on that. There are a number of fighters who got released from UFC. Just recently, Dana and the guys, you know, decided we had to make some changes, and there are new fighters coming into the UFC and the fighters going out. I would ask any fighter that got released from the UFC if they're not considered to be a good fighter and a good card draw. My opinion is to be a UFC fighter takes an awful lot of commitment, takes an awful lot of passion, and you have to be skilled in what you do. And as far as I'm concerned, there isn't any fighter on any UFC card that would determine a weak card.
Gegard Mousasi mentioned something about Vitor Belfort as a possible replacement. He expressed interest in taking a match. Can you get into any details about that?
No, I'm going to defer that to the guys who are the experts. One of the things primarily for me is I'm a great believer in there are people who know a lot more about this sport and the intricacies of each fight and each fighter than I do. To speculate about opponents and opportunities for fighters, I'd be doing you a disservice, and I'd be doing the fans a disservice.
This is the first time I've seen you in a scrum. Is this you getting your feet under the table, or just Dana couldn't make it?
Well, thank you. It's a little bit like the. Do you think it's a weak card? Dana and I go back and forth. I'm honoured to be in front of the press and the media. Representing this sport. Dana has confidence in me being able to do that, so I'd look at it as a term of endearment from Dana, because this is his world and he's just the master of it. It's absolutely not that he couldn't be here, because he wants to be here. I spoke to him at 3 o'clock this morning. He can't wait to be here on Friday. He's excited by the card and excited by it, but he wants me to get more engaged and more involved, and we have a debate about that, but that's my job.